But so I'm prompted today just to go back and probably, Bill Randall's probably got me onto this maybe 12 months ago. I saw him being prompted of the Lord to wherever he goes, he speaks on the basic things of gender. I forget gender, of sexuality, sex, you know what I mean, of male and female, and the differences between those things, okay? So I thought, well, probably now's a good time to put something on YouTube to say they all want to blend us all together, make us all one as they go there. Exactly, we're just people, persons, evolutionized human beings, bags of cells that walk around, whatever you want to say, but we're all equal and no different from one another. That's what they're selling. There are differences between men and women. You find it this way, it's easy to spot. If a woman falls over a chair in the middle of a room, a woman will come to you and say, I've just fallen over the chair in the middle of the room. If a man falls over a chair in the middle of the room, he says, who put that chair in the middle of the room? A man has an ego. You can't blame me, you won't accept those sort of things. You've got to deflect it onto someone else. So there's definitely differences between men and women. What is the difference? Well, if there's one word that sticks in a man's throat, it's sorry. In fact, I think that's a human condition, not just a male condition, but because of a man's ego, that's a hard word to get out of a man's mouth. Is that right, ladies? Ladies are very quiet here today. Christ makes the difference, I should say that. But it's evident, Genesis 1:27, God says these words, He created them male and female. He created them in His image, male and female is what He created them. Two distinct, different things that together make God's image, okay? Not the man makes God's image, or the woman makes God's image. Male and female make the image of God, okay? There's two different things going on. And so God created us different. We're of equal value in His sight. We're of equal dignity in His sight, equal status. But we are different. Would you agree, men? Have you worked out your wife yet? I'm still looking for the instruction book. Okay. Yeah. Exactly. So, look, we need to understand the differences if we're going to both fulfill our role and we're going to appreciate the differences that God made between us, because God says there are differences. And so what we men can do, but women can't, and what women can do, but men can't. Okay? There's different things. God made us complementary, not carbon copies of each other. That's the lie they'll tell you, that we're just people with different chromosomes. No, we're different from one another. Okay? Not just in marriage, but in society generally. We both have a contribution to make in society and in marriage that is different. It's complementary. It's not the same that goes through, okay? Let's start a little bit crass, I guess, with physical differences, okay? We all found out somewhere behind the back of the school shed or something, or swimming carnival, that there was a physical difference at some point. You know what I mean? Saw mum or dad in the shower and thought, what is that? You know? Something like that. So the most obvious for our differences physically, of course, is the reproductive organs. That's what everyone knows when we think of in these type of terms. Having said that, that difference physically points to fundamental differences in our personalities, in our makeups, just that physical difference and our function. It's quite clear from the way that we were made physically that the man is to take the initiative, okay? The man is to lead in that thing, and her body, the lady's body, is built to respond to the man, Okay? So even in the way that a man and a woman are made, God's plan is made evident that the man is to take the initiative, and that the woman then responds to the leadership of the male. Okay? That's where we're going from there. That's even built there. And even within the womb, we see at the point of intercourse, we have the sperm that's doing the initiating. It's seeking the female egg. That doesn't mean that the woman's passive, because as soon as the sperm pierces that egg, then the woman responds. But the leadership, the initiative, is by a male thing. That's just the way God created it, okay? So we find these type of things. So physiology tells us that male is responsible, female is responsive, okay? That's what physiology tells you. Many women want their men to lead, but they haven't yet put away childish things. I see this in many young men, especially, where they still haven't put away childish things, and so the woman is forced to take the initiative, forced to take the lead. And this is reality in a lot of marriages, okay? And I don't blame the women for that. Someone's got to do it. And if the man was too busy on his Xbox at night or PlayStation or can't get up to work in the morning, then someone's got to feed the family. I don't blame women for that. But men, that's our role, okay? We're to put away those things. And some of them have married a mother and not a wife. And so the wife is frustrated because she's had to try to fulfill the role of a woman and a man. And that wasn't the burden that she was supposed to carry, and yet a lot of women are in that position. And Satan hates women, and so we see today that the feminism has freed them from the role of motherhood, but what it's done is ban them almost from the role of motherhood, so they can only become a birth facility, and then they stick their kids in childcare because they've got to go out and work. They've got to do that role, fulfill that thing. So anyway, so they got to take on the role as initiator, decision maker, direction leader. Can I just be a little more crass? I guess it's not for anyone here, but maybe for the video. Some marriages are ruined right on the honeymoon, only because men do not learn this lesson. Just from a physiology point of view, well, most of you are married women. Men can climax within a minute, 2 minutes, okay? That's how man's built. A woman takes longer, 20, 25 minutes. Many young men do not know this, and so then their women do not experience the pleasure that God intended in the physical joining in marriage. And so even there we see that the man must exercise responsibility for the woman to experience the pleasure that God intended. A man must restrain himself to a point where his wife can then experience the same pleasure. I'm sorry to be frank, but some of this stuff needs to be said, is so that both parties will experience the pleasure at the same time. That's what God intended. So even there, a man has a responsibility within those physical attributes to be a leader, to be the one responsible, and then the wife will respond after that, okay? So if you don't do that, then men, you come home and you'll find a little note when you walk through the door. You said your tea's in the microwave, I've gone to bed with a headache. That's what you'll find. So men, we better learn that lesson, okay? I'll say this, couples that discover just that one simple truth will find a very powerful key for keeping their marriages together. Okay, that's what I'll just say about that. And then before I get off this crass sort of topic, but also, one thing that makes our species unique is that a woman's breasts are full even when not nurturing a child, okay? You'll have ladies that never get married that have full breasts. That is unique to our species. No other species has that. God made it that way. And of course in the Song of Solomon we see, my beloved, in the first chapter, verse 13 I think it is, my beloved is nestled between my breasts. And so breasts are made by God for both the comfort and companionship of their partner, and also for children, but not primarily for children as it is in every other system. You understand what I'm saying? God has made differences. We're distinct, both from the animals and from each other. Okay, that's enough of those topics. Let's get on to something a little less embarrassing. We can all have a little laugh. Ha, 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 ha. That's all done. Thank you. Okay, let's talk about bone structure. Our bone structure is quite different. If you get a paleontologist, he goes out on a dig or uncovers a mummy, almost immediately he can say that's a male or that's a female. How do they know? Well, male bones are thicker, they're stronger, but they're also rougher, okay? When God made us, it was from the dirt, but when he made women, he made it from our rib, a man's rib, and he said that was very good. It was finely crafted, better made than a man was made, okay? A man's bones are rougher than a woman's bones, and so we have that there. We're thicker and stronger, but rougher, okay? Also, and we men will know this, those of us who've had families and children, our muscles are quite different. From a man's point of view, our muscles are made for what they call striatic movements. Pulling and pushing, this is where we get our strength, okay? So we think we're great that way. But if you've had children, men, you find this, she says, will you hold the baby? And what she means is, will you hold the baby for about an hour or two? And in about 15, 30 minutes, you're finding, my goodness, this is tough work, I can't do this. But a woman can hold the baby for 8 hours at a time. You know what I mean? Was I the only man that thought, this is physically taxing, I'm not sure what's going on here, you know? But my wife could hold this baby. The muscles are made differently. In New Guinea, you have the women go to the markets, they go and get their food. They have a billum that hangs here. In fact, they might have a couple. They have a billum there, one of them, they might even carry a baby this way, and off their head they've got the billum full of the taro and chicken and fish and whatever it is, all the veggies in there, and they walk, and then there's a heck of a lot of weight in that billum, you know what I mean? But they walk, in Africa, they put the little towel around here, whatever, they put the big bowl, and they walk and they talk like it's nothing, you know, ha ha ha, keep their back straight. And what are the men doing? Not much, I can tell you that, in Africa, not much. That's how that works. But women's muscles are made for carrying, mainly in the pelvic region, but also for long extended carrying motions. Men aren't made for that. If you want the car pushed or pulled, get the bloke out there, right? You know what I mean? There was a story on, was it not Shetland Islands? Oh, I can't think of him. Oh, anyway, it's some Celtic guy, and he went into hospital. And they admitted him, he had a double hernia, you know. They said, well, how'd you get your hernia? He said, well, I was trying to lift this pallet onto my wife's back. So he ended up in hospital, but his wife was a better carrier than he was. How's that? Okay, also, our fat is different, okay? Men, it's distributed in a different way. You know you're middle-aged when your age shows around the middle, you know what I mean? She's down there and every bloke knows you drink enough, you get that big beer gut that comes on, okay? That's how we run. Obviously, women possess it in different areas. Also, key thing is our skin is different. We're not made the same, our skin is different. A woman's nerve endings are closer to the top of the skin than a man's. A man's skin is rougher and thicker. Okay, what's the practical implications of this? Well, a man will only get sexual arousal by touching the skin in certain parts of his body, but a woman is quite different because she can get a sexual message by touching, or a loving message, because of the sensitivity of her skin. Key for married men, ladies like to be hugged. They like to be touched. I said that on the Fighting for Your Family tapes. This is key for a woman. To feel loved, she needs that touch that's on her, right? You won't need to be fighting over each other. You say, imagine a conversation. These are the sort of conversations that go in the homes. It says, she says, do you still love me? He says, of course I do. This is a romantic conversation, of course, you know what I mean? She says, well, you never tell me. And he says, shouldn't have to after all these years. I'm still here, aren't I? If you'd have just hugged your wife or just held her hand or give her, stroke her arm, she'd feel that love coming through. She doesn't need to ask that question. For a woman, touch is very important, okay? Also, the other flip side of that is, as a man, be careful the way you touch a woman, okay? Not too touchy on other people's wives, okay? We don't want to be on that because a woman can receive sexual messages that way, and so don't be like that with other women, all right? Just practical teaching here. Okay. Mortality. Here we go. This is surprising. We all know it, but it's surprising. Our mortality is clearly different. Okay? For men, we're the weaker sex at both ends of life. At both ends of life. So when we're born, or even at conception, before we're born, at conception, the mortality rate is 150 males die for every 100 females that die. So at conception, babies that don't make all the way through to term, males die at 150 to 100. And at birth, we go 106 males die for every 100 females that die. The females are stronger in those early years. In fact, it doesn't equalise until the age of 4. More guys die than girls do until they get to the age of 4. Then it equalises at that point. And of course, I tell my clients, as the guys come in for retirement and redundancy, I say, on the way home, I said, you take Norman Road and you stop at the aged home and you go in. I said, throw your eye around and see how many blokes are in there. Because it's all these old widows sitting there, not too many widowers, you understand. That gives them another mindset when it comes to how much time I need to spend all my money. Because they're not going to make it, you know what I mean? So they can go in and have a look at that. So mortality rates, and also, I mean, life expectancies, just from an insurance point of view, I've got an 83-year life expectancy average. My wife is 86. However, generally, guys, women age better than men. Would that be fair to say? Men seem to pop their cork pretty, or get frail in that way. I know certainly Dad did towards the end. So blood is different, hormones are different, nervous system is different, brains are different. They're telling us we're the same, but scientifically, all these, we could go on for days on the differences between men and women, but they tell us we're the same. But let's think of the brain for a minute. Let's talk about psychological difference. And for men, this is very important. If you don't know the differences here, then you're likely to judge your wife by yourself, and that will lead to a lot of frustration because she's different than you are, okay? And your wife is going to become very frustrated with you because she's being misunderstood. The brain, we've all seen a picture of the brain. The brain has 2 lobes. You've seen those? Okay. Well, primarily, men use one side and women use the other side of the brain, primarily, on average, if you like. And I should say with all this stuff, you're going to find there's exceptions to the rules. These are all generalisations, and certainly as we are in our generation now, where all these stereotypes are getting knocked down, where there's skewing of going one way or the other, we're going to find aberrations to what the norm is for sure, and probably more so as we go. But these are all, what would you say, normal, tried and tested observations. These ones we're going to go through here. All of us use primarily one side of the brain, but you can train to use the other side. It's not like we're idiots, you're not just left with one side and, I can't do that. So they say for women, if you go to an art class and learn to draw, it's actually harder for you than for a man because you have to train to use the other side of your brain that normally would come easier to a bloke, That's what they tell me. I don't know, I'm just telling you what they tell me. So art classes are like that. Men generally, we trust our intellect. Women trust their intuition. Okay, so men will think things through. A woman generally feels something. I just don't know. They don't seem kosher to me, One of the most distinct differences, and this is really obvious when you learn it, a real obvious difference. Language is on the woman's side of the brain, okay? You look at linguistics come to a woman much easier than they come to a man, generally, okay? A man finds it more difficult to put his thoughts and feelings into words than a wife will, okay? A woman can immediately talk about their innermost thoughts and feelings. She just pours it out. You get with another woman or something and you just can pour these things out. Here's the way you shut up a man. You ask him, he becomes tongue-tied. You say, what's your most innermost fear? because he doesn't want to admit he's weak, or you know what I mean? We struggle and stumble. You know, what's your biggest temptation for a man? You know, we go. Therefore, she finds it easier to communicate with him than he does with her. That's just a fact. I sit with my wife and she'll talk. I thank God for that, because I couldn't hold the conversation for that long. You know what I mean? She loves it. We go for a long drive, or we sit in a park somewhere, and she'll talk to me for 2 hours. I'd be lucky if I've said 5 minutes worth of words, you know. But she can just talk and talk and talk. And I think, thank God for that, because we'd be bone dry in about 10 minutes, you know, otherwise. And I would be quite happy to sit there and just observe what's going on, and you know what I mean? But she enjoys that, and I enjoy that she enjoys it. So I'd have to say probably the communication breakdown is at the root cause of most breakdowns in marriages. So men, we've got to get with it. We've got to get with it, okay? But it affects church life too. When we have a prayer meeting, who's most likely to pray? Women would normally pray. And it's difficult. I mean, we should be praying together if we're husband and wives, but oftentimes we don't. Why? Because men get intimidated. You know, a woman sits and prays and it just pours forth, and it goes to the next one and goes to the next one, and a man's prayed, and after 5 minutes he's thinking, well, I've hit all the points. Where do we go from here, you know? So a woman has that gift of linguistics. Christ makes a difference. So I should say the Spirit of God makes a difference here. When the Holy Spirit comes in, especially if you have the gift of tongues or something like that, so it loosens the man's gifting in that regard. So that will do that. But women are more prone to pray than a man is open for it. And words come easily for them. Men need to learn to pray aloud. It doesn't come naturally. Okay. Interesting to note, you look at occupations. Most translators in the United Nations or in Brussels, you know, European Union, are women. Because linguistics come easy for them. They can learn 2-3 languages and it comes easy, you know what I mean? So they're more gifted in that area. They can handle 2 languages at once. We men struggle with just one, you know what I mean? We're a bit tough in that regard. So speech is something that men must develop. We've got to learn to develop that speech. Otherwise, we are literally a caveman. We come in, we grunt, we go back in, you know. That's how we go. And some men are like this. You need to learn to speak. It's like sending ladies to an art class. We've got to learn to use the other side of our brain, okay, so we can do that. All right, so how do we know that this goes right back to the garden? Adam heard from God, standing beside Eve. Satan comes and begins to talk to Eve. He starts misquoting the Bible. Next thing, she's misquoted the Word of God. What did Adam do? Nothing. He sat there like a mute, like the caveman, standing right beside her while his wife's getting deceived. She's out of her depth in a conversation led by this demonic being, and he says nothing. Now, this is how some men are. They're so passive, they won't speak. But God needs men to speak. We need to learn to speak. And that's why, after that chapter, Eve is never again held responsible for the initial sin. Adam is always responsible, because he heard what God said. He should have corrected his wife and said, hey, you haven't quite got that right. You know, it's not every tree of the garden. God said this tree and that tree, and you know what I mean? But he never said anything. He sat there and went, Oh, she's eating the fruit. Now what am I going to do? Well, I don't want to be alone. I'll eat the fruit. You know, that's how he thought. So we've got to get into that. All right. So we notice we've got to learn to express ourselves, our thoughts, our feelings. And a great place to start, men, is in men's company. If you've got mates or a men's fellowship or something on those lines, or shed, that's why shed happens or whatever that is gaining momentum, because men will never open up about these things in mixed company. They never want to look weak in front of their wives or their family. But men, well, we've got to start. If you're not good at that, then get a mate and talk and share and begin to speak in those ways so you can actually express yourself and learn to express those things. Men need a brotherhood. okay, in order to speak in these terms, to learn to speak in those ways. Otherwise, we just shut up. Okay, but most of the gifts of God give us are speech gifts. Okay, word of knowledge, word of wisdom, preaching, evangelism. So we, especially men, we need to learn to exercise our speech. If the church is full of silent male saints, then the world is going to suffer because it's not balanced the way it should be. Okay, here's another difference. Men can think in abstract terms. Okay, we think in the abstract and women thinks in the concrete. So a man generally thinks about a theory of a thing, okay, and the woman is very practical. How's that going to play out? How does that actually affect the real world? And a man can talk about things endlessly. Okay, you'll find a party, especially Australians, all the men are at one end, all the women are at the other. All the men at the one end will be talking about the football or talking about motorbikes or cars or something like that. What are the women talking about? They're talking about the men at the other end of the room. They're talking about people. But men talk about things, you know what I mean? We're in the abstract is where we like to be, and so that's how that runs. In music, and look, women have been free to compose music for thousands of years, but mainly men compose, but women arrange. Okay, they're very good at putting the things, okay, this is how it should go, we're going to do this here and that way. So women are very good mostly at arranging, but mostly men do, and there are exceptions to these, but men compose. Here's another one. Mathematics and science are predominantly or prominently a man's domain. It uses its natural inclination. It uses his side of the brain for that. Okay? Chess has about 500 champions and about 54 masters, I think it is. And of both those groups, you can count the women on one hand. You know what I mean? It's a strategic game, and so it suits the man's brain. He's thinking of all the steps ahead. There are women champions, I should say. It's not like we can't do these things. We can learn those, but naturally these things are suited to a certain group. Okay? Here's another one. Men tackle big things, and women have the ability to care for little things. Okay? So here's an example. You say, of us men here that are married, has your wife, it may not be written, got a little list of jobs for you? So you've got things like fix the tap, and you say to them, well, I'm going to put a new kitchen in there anyway, so no point fixing the tap. I've got everything picked out. You just need to be patient because I'm just going to put that new kitchen in. And she says, I don't care about that, I just want the tap fixed. Or she says, have you noticed, Dale, all the weeds in the garden bed? And he says, no, that's because I'm going to put a pond in there and a bit of a rockery. And she says, well, I don't care, I just want it to look nice, I want the weeds out. We think differently. Men are looking at a bigger picture, and the women are looking at the practical needs of something that needs to be done in that way. Okay, so we've got men are good at big challenges, but not at the detail. We're not good at detail. You ladies are much better at that. Okay, so the great debate when we get into this thing is the differences environmental, or are they imposed by our upbringing? Okay, like they want to say that we're the same, so the reason why we're the same is because we're brought up to, you girls play with Barbie dolls and we play with whatever we play with, you know, Tonka trucks or something. So that's what they're trying to say. The question is, are these differences that we observe, are they biological or are they environmental? So that's the human response is, of course, that the differences are just education's, environmental. That's what the differences are. And if we change the way that we bring up these boys and girls, this is where we're at now, we can make persons, not separate sexes, and so we can treat everybody the same. That's where they're at. That's where they're at. I should say that all research is going in the opposite direction from that. But they don't care what the research says. They care what their agenda is, and so they're about destroying these things. So you take a boy and a girl and you tell them you can draw anything you like. Anything you like. Generally, a boy will draw something mechanical, you know, a truck, a plane, something like that. And girls will draw something domestic or flowers or something along those lines, okay? At 5 months of age, a girl can recognise someone in a picture. Us boys take many more months before we can do that, okay? And immediately they're interested in people. Boys they couldn't give two hoots, you know what I mean? That takes them longer. And we see the gift of language also with boys, because girls are much quicker at expressing themselves linguistically and all that sort of stuff, and boys take a lot longer. We got noises. Wee-hee-hee, woo, bing, 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 boo. This is how boys talk. I thought it was just Matthew. I'd forgotten, you know. And we went to the playground. I saw a few people his age running around doing the same thing. Woo! You know, I thought, that's a boy. Okay, we got the right one. Okay, good. No differences. Okay. So that we've got those differences. Education doesn't make the difference, but it does pick up the differences. Not only are our churches being feminised, but so is our education system. And my wife here, she's an educator, she didn't agree with that, so I have got some gear here. So, and we don't have to agree, as my daughter... Yeah, and anecdotal evidence. So we did have some stuff there, but my contention is that in the last 25 years, the education system has changed to a feminine education system, okay? I don't think it's any secret that boys are a lot more behind the curve academically now than what girls are. And there's a reason for that, because this education system has been feminised, okay? So our education system and our employment system also, here's an interesting fact, our employment system also is now heavily weighted in favour of females. Do you know that 2/3 of all jobs created now go to women? So unemployment is fast becoming a male problem. How's that? Anyway, so I've got some statistics here with this feminisation of teaching. And so one of the things we note is that the amount of male teachers that are involved there hasn't grown an iota. It's exactly the same. So 1990 is 29,550. In the year 2000, it had dropped 2,000, 27,596. However, the women's percentage has grown. And so when boys are in this education system, they're seeing female role models, not males. And so we've got Dr. Kevin Donnelly, who's a senior research fellow at the Australian Catholic University in 2018. He gave some reasons. I listened to a speech for him on this, and he said some of the reasons, which are quite surprising, but these are the reasons that he put forth, is that because it becomes an actual dangerous workplace to be in. I know a teacher who suffered this because of the pedophilia charges, the sexual harassment charges. Men are not willing to enter into an environment like that where they could lose everything by a false accusation by a student. And so it becomes a dangerous foray for men to enter into because of those legal challenges. Okay, so also we have rules that, you know, a child falls over, your natural inclination is to go to that child and help them up, and if they're crying, to stop that child crying through a physical touch. That becomes very dangerous, and there's rules now to prevent that from occurring. And so from a male's perspective, very difficult to do that. Also, they've skewed the curriculum at universities and things along those lines. He says, keep in mind when I say these things that the gifting for language is with the women's side of the brain. Men are not that way, which is why science and mathematics are better for men, because it's all theoretical and it's not a lot of writing. But for the women, much easier that way. They've gone to open classrooms, collaborative approach and teamwork. It's a more nurturing approach. Haven't we changed from where the education system was? It was, some would say brutal, you know what I mean? But it was a much firmer environment in education. Remember getting clobbered for speaking in class? Well, that's out the window now. You don't even get clobbered for swearing in class. you know. So that's all gone. So that we've got a nurturing approach, we've got group learning. We can't tell kids that they've failed. One teacher tell me they can't use red pen because it offends these kids. You know what I mean? We won't do that. No one gets held back anymore. Remember when we went through, we'd say, oh, there's Johnny over there, he failed last year, so he's back with us again. You know what I mean? No one does that anymore. You go on because it's a social thing, right? It's making sure that they feel good and accepted socially, not whether they achieve or not. And so we've come away from achievement-based to a team approach. Let's get things across the line, okay? So we've got that. In Victoria, in Victoria, they've changed 4 out of 10, which used to be a fail, and they changed this year. They changed the report cards to say not yet achieved. And the parents had no idea what was going on. So this is in Victoria. So if your child come 4 out of 10, they'd say not yet achieved. Well, what does that mean? They didn't hand in an assignment, or what does that mean? You know, it means they're going to get there at some stage, or well, it used to be the old days. They just put F, you know what I mean, and off we went. Need more work! Exclamation mark! Exclamation mark! Exclamation mark! Depending on how you wear it. So that's how they go. So young boys, they need strong men role models when they grow. Without it, boys lack resilience, they lack confidence, and that's the sort of males that are coming out of our schools now, okay? They don't know where they fit. They don't know where they fit. Also, just one last one on that before we move on. Here we have a female physicist, okay? Female physicist, and she's saying feminizing education is setting us up to fail. It's a damning, this is, was it Guardian, Daily Telegraph, here we go. It was a damning criticism of Australia's school curriculum from top science professor Michelle Simmons this week. She gave the Australian of the Year speech in 2017, and that's where this sort of all came from. She attacked the high school physics curriculum for being feminised. In other words, the way our children are being taught has been softened to encourage girls to pursue a career in maths or technology. And she's saying, let's go over there. It's boys. From the students coming to university, I see little evidence this has made any difference. Indeed, I see many students complaining that the physics curriculum has left them ill-equipped for university, she says. If we want young people to be the best that they can be at anything, we must set the bar high and expect them to jump over it. My strong belief is that we need to be teaching all students, both boys and girls, to have high expectations of themselves. She's saying they're softening up the curriculum, won't go through all of that, but they've softened it up to encourage more girls through to the science, is it the steps? Is that what they call? Step things. So science, maths programs, things along those lines. They want to get the girls through there. So they're softening it because it's harder for girls. They use the other. I mean, she's done it. She's a physicist, and she's obviously a very good one. And so she's trained the other side of her brain, but because a lot of the girls aren't interested in that, or it's a bit more harder for them to do it, they find it, they're softening things down to get more girls across there. And she's finding they're dumb when they get there. Both boys and girls are dumb because the whole curriculum's coming down because they want to treat us as if we're the same. But we're not same, okay? You speak to experienced teachers, they tell you boys and girls learn very differently. And so we see much more in our education systems. It's assignment-based, okay? It's all writing, which is not good for blokes, because we don't express ourselves too well verbally, let alone verbally, okay? So it takes training to get that other side of the brain going, and so females find that type of learning much easier. Enough said on that. Okay, another fundamental difference. If you've got nothing else, listen to this one. A man is goal-oriented, okay? But a woman is needs-oriented, okay? A man is goal-oriented, a woman is needs-oriented. For a man to fulfill his potential, he's got to have a goal in front of him that he hasn't yet achieved, okay? That hasn't been reached. He's got to have a purpose to get up in the morning, okay? That's why unemployment in men is much worse than unemployment for women, okay? because it robs a man of the very reason to get up in the morning without a goal. That's why there's so much midlife crisis. Okay, because generally by 40 years of age, a man has gone as high as he's going to go in the, you know what I mean, in whatever field he's in. They get up to the top there, they look around, there's not much here. Hello? That's when, ladies, men go crazy. Because it's nothing to do with hormones, it's to do with they've reached their goal. This is as far as I'm going to get. I don't have anything set in front of me now. So what do? I tell you what we do. We sell the house. We travel around the world. We trade in the wife for a newer model. We get a sports car or a Harley Davidson. And we go crazy because we do not have a purpose anymore. There's nothing that's locking us in. And so they're looking at 20, 25 years ahead of them with doing the same thing, achieving nothing, and they lose all purpose in life. They say, where do we go from now? So these are the sort of things that go on. What an advantage to be a Christian male, because the goal is always ahead of us. The goal is always ahead of us. You have a goal to reach for until your dying breath. Men who retire, well, I see it all the time. They're dead within 2 or 3 years of retiring. Why is that? Because they don't have a goal. They don't have a reason. They're not linguistically wired up like you ladies. They don't have the community around them. Men go back into the cave and they wonder what I'm doing here. Their value is no longer there because society doesn't value me. I'm no longer of any use to anybody. And therefore, what's the point? You know what I mean? They pop their corks. Okay. Men live for the future, and these are generalizations, but women generally live for the now. Okay, you'll find in a crisis, you have men shut up. You can't get a word out of them. What's going on? The thing's just torn apart, and the man stands there like a mute. What's he doing? He's thinking about all the ramifications of what this means and the outfall that's coming up. What does a woman do? Oh, wow, that's bad news. What if we put the kettle on? I'll make some scones. And we just can sit and... She's concerned about what we can do now about the situation to ease the tension, to make it right. But a man is like a mute. He's always thinking in the future what this means. A woman's thinking, well, man, this is really bad news. You've got cancer. Well, let's have a cuppa and we'll just toss it down and talk about it. You know what I mean? Men treat things differently to how women treat things. And so we shouldn't expect one to be one way and one the other. This is how we're wired up. So men live in the future and not the now. Women don't need that at all, and we shouldn't expect them to. Women are need-oriented. They are most fulfilled when they're meeting an immediate need. I'm worried about Jazz because where the kids all go, you know what I mean? She's going to be left. I guess we've got Matthew, so what a gift. I guess that'll, you know, it's a needs that makes her feel wanted in that regard. Women are in the present, but men are thinking out. I guess a really bad example. When we first got married, we did our honeymoon at the Gold Coast, you know, and so we're going down. And so we've got you know, I've looked at the map that's gone all the way Rocky to the Gold Coast, right? We get to the Gold Coast, and it's the old days. It's not the nav man. That saved our marriage, the nav man. But we had the old UBDs. Remember those? And so we hadn't had a fight or anything, you know what I mean? We're all good. And we're trying to find this hotel. And it's just an example. We're thinking ahead, us men, you know. So I'm singing out streets. It's a set of lights. This is Johnson Street, and then there's going to be Tony Street here, and then we're going up to Queen over here. And she's saying things like, I think we should have turned left at the last set, or turn right at these lights. And we're just getting front. She's thinking in the now, and I'm thinking, you know what I mean? So it's just the mindset. We had our first blue, by the way. What a way to spend your honeymoon, you know? And like that. So eventually I pulled over, grabbed the map, and we got there ourselves, you know? But it's just, not to say, I'm sure there's navigators out there that are women. It's just using what comes naturally. A woman applies what's now A man doesn't care about what's now. He's looking at the future, okay? So there's two different mindsets that come to go. Here's a diabolical thing. A man can split himself into parts, whereas a woman likes to have a whole of life going on. Okay, what do you mean by that? Women don't like life that's in compartments. She wants her life to be one single integrated organism, is what she wants in life. Men are not like that. We've got boxes that we run with, okay? We can have 4 or 5 different boxes going on. A woman goes to work. I got in trouble for this once. A woman goes to work and she takes a picture of her family with her and puts it up at work because she wants her work friends to know about her life at home, you know. She's trying to integrate her work life with her family life, so it all becomes one united thing. I got in trouble. I got called into the office, actually. I was at an accounting firm, and they had me in this back office. I mean, it was a dingy thing. So I didn't put anything up. And they said, listen, you've been here for 2 years now. You haven't got a picture of your family up there. I said, I didn't know that was a requirement. You know what I mean? I said, okay, I'll bring one in. But it never occurred to me because as a man, I've got my work box and I've got my home box. But for a woman, that was just natural. This first thing Jazz did was take a photo into work, put it up there, you know what I mean? It's integrating the whole life as one, whereas a man is, we just turn up to work, mate. We don't, you know, if they want to tell you about their kids, that's great. If we don't, we'll just talk about things all day, you know what I mean? It doesn't worry us. So that's how we're wired up. So a woman is constantly unifying her life into one life. Men are not that way. We can have 4 or 5 different lives simultaneously. It can be one person at work, another at the club, another at home, and never these lives shall meet. He just adapts. Some men are very shy in church, but then you go out to visit them at the workplace, and they're totally different. You know what I mean? They're ordering blokes around and put that over there, get the crane, move it here. But you get them in church and they sit like a dumb mute. You know what I mean? It's boxes for them. You know, they've got their little bits going on. Okay. Here's a practical thing for men, a danger for us. Men can be in love with more than one woman. Okay? When we look in, he can have one wife at home, he can have a mistress at work, and he can have a prostitute for excitement. Okay? And he can say in his heart, I'm in love with every one of these women. I see all you women shaking your head. But when the New Testament was written, this was common Roman practice. They had a wife at home, they had a concubine, and they would visit the temple priestess or prostitute, and this was normal for them. And a man could say, I love every one of these girls. But women, when you find out that this is going on, what do you say? You say to the man, you don't love me anymore. You can't love me anymore because you've got all these women out there. And we say, why do you say that? I do love you, is what men say. Because our heart is compartmentalised into 3 different segments of our life. I'm not saying that's right. I'm saying that's how men can operate. A woman, on the other hand, will love one man normally only, and then trade you in for another man only. But she doesn't normally love 2, 3 men at the same time. But men can do that. They have their heart divided up, okay? So we need to understand that there's a difference in the way that... And that's the reason why, by the way, that most of the warnings, the sexual temptation warnings, are addressed to men in the Bible, because we are more prone to that, because our heart, we can divide things up. And that's why we have all these preachers that come out and they've compartmentalised their life. This is my spiritual life, and then here's my other life, and then here's another life, because they can put them in boxes. So if a husband really loves his wife and she feels that, she'll never look at another man. Okay, there's for us men. But men say this, I have to leave this marriage because I feel in love with someone else, as if that justifies breaking up a marriage. But it's quite possible for a man to be in love with 2 or 3 women at the same time, but that's no justification for breaking your covenant with someone. You say, you've met someone, you've married someone, we went to a wedding yesterday, they said all these vows, then tomorrow he meets somebody, and my goodness, she's so much more compatible. You know what I mean? She really gets me. She understands me. You know what I mean? We're made for each other. I love her with and so I've got to ditch this other girl. No, you don't have to do that. You've got to honour your commitment is what you've got to do there, okay? So we're fickle and we need the Word of God, us men, to keep our hearts, okay? We can't compartmentalise our life, but for us this is both a strength and a weakness as a man. Okay, a strength and a weakness which we'll come to. A woman's desire is to unify her life, and that is also both a strength and a weakness, okay? Here's an important one. A man can separate his thoughts from his feelings, okay? But a woman struggles with that, okay? So her thoughts and her feelings are all bound up together. That's why you can argue with men, but men think very, very carefully before you argue with women. Okay? If you argue with a man, it's thoughts challenging thoughts. Okay? We're having a theoretical discussion and we're and it can get quite heated. Sometimes there's fisties and stuff like that, but I mean, who's seen it where 2 blokes have been into each other, then after that's finished they put their arm around each other, they go and have a beer at the bar, you know what I mean? I'm thinking of Christopher Pyne. He just resigned and he gave his speech. And when he gave his speech, said hooray to everybody. And Albanese came across the floor and gave him a big hug. And I thought, these two have been into each other on morning TV for ages. But you see it quite often, these politicians, they hate each other's guts, they're vitriol going across, and then when Parliament time's over, they're shouting each other a beer and a lunch at the club. You know what I mean? This is how men can operate. We can have a big confrontation and the feelings get put to one side and we're just confronting ideas. With a woman, it's different. Her thoughts and her feelings are all bound up together, and so we cannot try and argue like we do with a man with a woman, okay? And so men are able to discuss things and challenge each other without breaking relationships, but it's harder for women. I'll give you another picture. Margaret Thatcher goes into power with a team of blokes behind her. Over her terms, and look, she was a strong lady and she was pushed a lot of reforms through, but as she did, because she was brutal with it, a lot of the party disintegrated. Now, she stayed in Parliament until the last man that came into power with her rebelled against her. When that guy rebelled, she'd taken all the defections personally. You know, a bloke would have said, well, stuff it, we'll just replace you out and get a new cabinet in. She felt betrayed by these blokes, and when the last one walked away from her within 2 months, she resigned. That was the end of her. Because it was harder for her to accept the criticisms without feeling that personally. I don't know whether this is fair to say or not, this is what we're saying. So that's why men, we need to be careful about arguing with ladies, okay? 2 reasons why. Because there's only 2 ways as a man you can win an argument with a lady, remembering that she is much more nimble on the linguistic side of her brain, okay? So as a man, we start all right, and how do we win? We shut up and we get huffy. We send them to Coventry, that's what we do. Or the other way, how do we win? I'll tell you how we win. And there's lots of domestic violence people out there will testify that because men, we can't compete. We don't compete linguistically, and therefore you get frustrated, and if the man doesn't feel like he can express himself, that he gets frustrated with that, he'll either shut down or he'll belt someone up. That's how it'll run, okay? So we need to be sensitive to one another when we're arguing that way. I believe the book of Proverbs, the easiest way to stop all that water dispersing is to keep the dam in place. Don't even start. Get early, you know, diffuse the situations. Talk about things rationally so that there's not this big hitting out. So the strength of females is making life one whole, integrated part. That means you ladies are a fantastic source of unity, okay? Men can survive with all the divisions, no problem. You know what I mean? Just isolate themselves, compartmentalise them away. We'll stay in here. Ladies, you want to unify everyone there. Therefore, grandmothers can be a wonderful part of unifying a family. Okay? Not so much grandfathers. They're not going to pull anyone together. They're more interested in getting their handicap down or their next project or whatever the goal is in front of them. But ladies, you'll be a wonder. If you're the right way, you're a great unifying force in pulling the family together. You know what I mean? You'll take everyone's needs and feelings and thoughts into consideration and try and bring that into a unified whole. Men, we're not interested too much in that. You know what I mean? If we can get along all right, that's okay. If I don't see you, I don't see you. You know what I mean? But ladies, you're built different. It's a great source of strength that way. The strength of males is compartmentalising life, separating thoughts from feelings. If you think about it, this put males in a position where they're more objective thinkers. Women handle things more subjectively. How she feels is a major part of her decision. It's bound up in the thought process, okay? I'm not saying that's wrong, that's just the two sides of the brain. A man stands back, he puts his feelings aside, okay? You can be friends with someone for 30 years. Then an issue comes up and a man can do this. Well, let's just put those 30 years to one side and let's just examine this thing to see whether it's right or not. Ladies will struggle with that because you'll say, look at the history that we've had together, there's been wonderful times here, and so your thought processes and your decision making get more bound up in the feelings that you've got. That is not the case with a man. A man can just cut it off and just go like that and make it cut and dry, okay? So he puts his feelings to one side. And he says these things. The man says, now let's reason this stuff out. Let's see what's right and wrong in this decision. My wife needs me to do that, and I need her intuition to bring the balance on the other side, okay? Where I can be a brute force and ignore the feelings, she needs to be the balancing act that brings the compassion, the mercy, and the grace that comes with those decisions, okay? So that's where we need to be there. I think it's clear that discipline should be in male hands for that reason, the objectiveness of it. Okay, I don't think it's wrong. I think it's harder for a woman, and my mum was the disciplining force in my house growing up, I'd have to say that, which was unfair on her, I guess. But Dad wouldn't do it. You know what I mean? I don't think he ever smacked me, Dad. So, you know, Mum had to be that, unfortunately. But I think biblically and from a Christian perspective, discipline should be in a male's hands. So I don't think it's wrong for a woman to say, you wait until your father gets home. He'll deal with you. You know what I mean? And I think that's a good thing to do, because as a woman, your feelings will get bound up in that decision as to whether the child needs punishment or discipline and what that should be. It won't be as objective as the bloke who'll be cut and dry. No, we need to do this and that, whatever. Your feelings will be bound up in there. Okay, so there was a case, in fact, where a woman was accused of murdering her husband. All the evidence and the eyewitnesses said she'd done it. But they couldn't get a unanimous verdict. There was 11 blokes and one woman on the jury. And so the judge said, well, let's take a majority verdict. And so the verdict came out 11-1. So they said to the lady, they said, well, what happened? Why did you... She said, well, I couldn't put the poor girl away. When I heard the backstory of what she had to put up with from this bloke and the fact that she's now a widow, I felt sorry for her, so I couldn't vote guilty. You know what I mean? Whereas the blokes just said, all the evidence is pointing there, she's gone, baby. So there's a difference in thinking when it comes to that, and so we need to take that into account. God definitely puts discipline in male hands because of that type of thinking. It's more cut and dry in that hands. It's interesting though, however, when it came to the caring, the loving, the needs that needed to be met, the ones that you see in the Bible, you never seen the blokes running around doing things. It was women providing this and that, caring for the needs of Jesus. The blokes sat at the table and waited for their dinner to arrive, you know what I mean? But the girls were providing all the needs. They were interested in Jesus' immediate needs. He needs his feet washed. He needs something to eat, you know what I mean? He needs these things. I'll go and get that. We'll sell that to get this for him because he's going to get buried. You know, the blokes never thought of that. The blokes thought, who's going to be the greatest? They're thinking ahead. You know what I mean? When I get there, where am I going to sit? The women are thinking, man, he's going to be dead in 3 days. We need to embalm him. Let's go and sell all that we get and get the alabaster box. Different thinking, eh? Different thinking. Not one better than the other. Just a different way of thinking things. So discipline means setting aside the personal feelings and asking whether or not punishment's deserved. And so God sets that in a man's domain. The missing dimension of the church today, of course, is what? Church discipline. We've got churches where no discipline is exercised whatsoever. And we either go two ways here. And it's in one way, it's the feminisation of the church, because you'll either be, like I think of single mothers, it's very hard to get the balance. You either go so soft because the man's deserted you that you want to love and nurture, embrace this child, or you think, I don't have a father figure now in this guy's life, and they go super hard. And so you find two things in churches. You've got either really hard-nosed, heavy shepherding, or you've got the anything goes thing going on. So that's what I mean by the feminisation of the church. The balance is not there. So we've got, either we're crushing people by being overbearing, or we're at the other end where we don't want to hurt people's feelings. We've got the whole nurturing thing going on, and so there's no correction going on inside the church. And so the church has got really good at condemning the world for immorality, but we're ignoring immorality within the church. Fornication, adultery, these things, wrong remarriages and stuff like that, where, it's come from a wrong basis, and we say nothing. In the feminisation of the church, it's only one half of God that'll be preached. It's all grace. It's the Joseph Prince model is what's going on. But what did Paul say in the book of Romans? Romans 11 says this, behold the goodness and the severity of God. It's the balance, it's the male and female lobes is what we're talking about here. The ability to judge objectively and, the severity of God. And on the other side, it's the caring, nurturing, loving that's going on. And so we need those two that go on. Behold the goodness and severity. Not just the goodness, okay, that comes on. We need the two there. So you've got to think of what we're getting fed today, because if you've got a preacher on TV or radio, all of those guys know this one thing, that they're one click away from getting turned off. And so we never hear messages on the severity of God. Because they don't want you to turn off, because they're collecting the offering at the end of the program. All right? So they are preaching what? The kindness, the love, the goodness, which is all true, by the way, but it's not the whole person of God. And you don't get it because they will not preach it. Because if they start down that road, you go, you turn over. We'll go and watch Top Gear. So they don't preach any of that stuff. We're not getting that. So God requires men to stand up and preach doctrine, what is right and what is wrong. That's the missing ingredient. We've got plenty of care, plenty of love, plenty of compassion, but we don't have doctrine. We don't have what's right and what's wrong, and that's because the church has been feminised there. Okay, the church then moves in, and by feminisation I mean it becomes the church is what we feel. Because the feelings become important in the decisions, not like a man thinks, so compartmentalised. Let's put all those feelings aside, what's right and what's wrong. So the church has gone the other way and said, okay, we're just going to go on feelings. Now, there's a balance. We need both. Okay, if you go all the man's way, you end up like the bachelor pad. It's practical, but you wouldn't want to live there. You know what I mean? There's got one cup of milk, he's got one saucer, he's got one knife and fork, he's got one chair. He's got everything that he needs in life, but who'd want to live like that? It takes the care and nurture for a woman to put that stamp of it to make it a home is what's needed. And so the two are needed, but we've got one devoid of the male thing in the church. So one thing I'll say in this, I'll skip the other bit, but I'll just say this because we're going a little bit longer. The head doesn't mean the source. When 1 Corinthians 11 says that, I'll have you know the head of every man is Christ, and the head of the woman is man, and the head of Christ is God. Now you read books out there and they'll say this. They'll say the head means the source, like in the source of a river. The head of a river is what it means. Well, that can't be the case, because that makes a mockery of the scripture that says God is the head of Christ. Because Christ never knew a beginning. He always was. There was no source of Christ. What it means is an authority. A headship is what it is. And so a head doesn't mean source in that way. I'll just address that because that's in many books. Okay, so it means Christ is the head of the church. He leads us. He gives us direction. Okay? That leaves us one question. It says, what ministry is open to women then? Well, I say all ministries. You can be an evangelist, prophet, teacher, pastor. All ministries are open to women, but the sphere in which it's exercised is limited. If it puts women in the place of authority over a man, I believe it's wrong, based on that scripture, because the headship is to be male. Okay, so in honouring that, God says, don't have a woman teach a man, is what it says. That's how I... But does it mean you can't be a prophet? No. Does it mean you can't be a pastor? No. Does it mean you can't be a preacher? No. It just means the sphere is then for womanhood. And I tell you what, there's a fantastic woman, I don't know who she is on Vision FM. She is a great teacher on there. It's on 2020, or maybe it was just once. Well, I've heard her a couple of times. She's got a great knowledge of the Word of God. It's nothing about ability, but God says, because of my structure, this is the way it is. One will be the head of the other, be the head of the other. And women, this is what they say. They say, listen, I'm happy for you guys to be the head of the house, as long as you're under the headship of Christ. As soon as you move out of that, you become a dictator, you become an authority, you become a bully. That's what you become. Men, we need to step back from that. We need to become the leaders that Christ was, the sacrificial one that gives themselves. When your wife knows that she's loved, that she's accepted, that the best interest, you're going to put her interest above your interest, she will gladly follow in behind you. Everything we know about human government tells you this. As soon as you get a dictator, whether it's Saddam Hussein, Gaddafi, the regime in South Africa, as soon as you get something that's apartheid, bullying, segregational, there becomes rebellion. As soon as there's a division between us, it's mine and I'm seeking my stuff and you're just over here. As soon as we start that sort of mindset, a dictatorship, there'll come a rebellion. It may not come at once, but there will come a rebellion. We need leadership that is Christ-like, is what we're looking for in our homes. We're looking for leadership that's gentle and loving, strong as a man would be, but we're looking at that. And ladies, then we're looking for submission in that way that's gentle and loving as well. Men, if you take nothing out of this, I'll say this, be careful how you argue with your wives. Recognise the difference, that her feelings are caught up with her opinions. That's not the way with a man. We can battle it out and go like that. So if you want to injure her spirit, if you want to injure her, then attack her like you would a bloke, and you'll find you'll be attacked yourself. We don't go that way. Ladies, we need to be gentle with us as well. Realise that you're unifying things. Men don't think that way. We're in little boxes all over the shops. We can stick all our feelings to a side, which is why we can seem very cold-hearted at some times and things like those with the decisions that we make. Recognise that's how God has made us for leadership, so that we can make objective decisions that put all the feelings aside. And so when you don't understand us, That's where we're coming from. God is the blend of the two. God is not one or the other. God is the blend of the two. And if we get the two right, we can have a marriage made in heaven. If we get the two right, we can have a life that is so rich in following God that we'll be blessed. But all of this is getting destroyed because they're saying there's no difference between men and women. There's differences biologically, there's differences psychologically. We are made completely differently in the way we think. That's why we don't understand one another. We can spend our whole lives trying to delve into one another's psyche, but we're using two sides of the brain. And we do need to learn to try to get across that other side. So we get these gifts that the other party has got, but we also will never get as good as the other party will be. That's how it's meant to be. I look at my wife and I said, I need someone who's actually, I prayed when I was looking for a wife, I said, I need someone who's going to have an eye out for needs. Because I could go my whole life and not meet any needs. I'd be concerned about teaching truth and making sure that we're on the right track. But, you know, my eye wouldn't naturally go that way, so I needed a set of eyes that would look and see hurting people and see people that needed compassion, needed uplifting. And she's been a real blessing that way, you know what I mean, to bring those needs to my attention. She focuses on things I don't focus on, and I focus on things that she doesn't focus on. And so together we're a wonderful team. I think. You better ask her. But other than that, we need both of those things to have a wonderful marriage. I just want to bring that up because they're trying to destroy the differences. They're taking down the toilet doors that say male and female and trying to treat us both the same. I don't know how many daughters are going to get raped in those situations, in those dunnies where you have men and women in those confined spaces, and you've got all sorts of shenanigans going on as they try and destroy these barriers. But God said in the beginning, I created them male and female. We're meant to be different and we're meant to be complementary. And Father, we thank you, Lord, for your word. God, I pray, Father, that you will just help us to embrace those that are different, God. Those that think differently. God, those that see things differently. God, help us to understand those that are married here. Lord, help us to understand our partners. God, give us the gift of insight so that we can be one, a picture of God, made in the image of God, not just individually, but as a combined group. Lord, and I lift up every marriage in this place. God, it's the focus of attack for the devil and his demon cohorts, for human government, removing the ancient landmarks. But God, when marriage goes, society goes, and so goes all order, and chaos and rebellion will come. But God, in the Christian church, I pray for Christian marriages. Protect them, Lord. Put hedges around them. God, give us understanding. Protect us from this culture, the toxic nature of it, Lord. God, keep our thinking away from the cultural norms that are being established here, which are totally baseless in science and baseless in logic. But God, nonetheless, they're prevailing in our time. And God, I'm praying, Father, that you'll just cause our marriages to endure, and not only to endure, but to be victorious in you. Mantle our marriages with the Spirit of God and cause us to be a testimony against everyone who's betraying their vows out there, everyone who is breaking down their marriages, everyone who's tearing asunder their partners. And God, bring us to a place of unity and understanding, I pray in Jesus' name. And everybody said, Amen. Is there anybody who needs